Looking at this historical photograph, you can get a sense of the bustling streets of Rameshwaram in the 19th century. Deep within one of those streets stood an ancestral limestone house, home to a short, unassuming young boy. He often felt out of place next to his remarkably tall and handsome parents. His mother, Ashiyama, possessed a boundless generosity. She spent her days feeding a constant stream of wandering outsiders right on the kitchen floor, to the point where far more strangers ate with the family than actual relatives did. Between a reliable roof over his head and a fiercely warm community, the boy grew up wrapped in material and emotional security. His days were calm and ordinary until the evenings arrived. A short walk from his home stood a very old mosque. At dusk, the neighborhood gathered outside, with Hindu and Muslim families waiting quietly together in the evening air. They were waiting for his father. The boy would watch, mesmerized, as his father performed a mysterious ritual, gracefully dipping his fingertips into bowls of water held out by the waiting crowd, silently reciting prayers over the ripples. The villagers took this water home, believing it possessed the power to cure their invalid relatives. Days or weeks later, many of those sick people would actually arrive at the boy's house to offer their thanks. The young boy didn't understand a single word of the chanted Arabic prayers, but looking at the results, he held a rock-solid conviction that those words were reaching God. This left the boy grappling with a profound mystery. He was witnessing his father apparently command forces that defied logic, leaving him desperate to know if the man who raised him was wielding supernatural power. This towering structure is the famous Shiva temple of Rameshwaram, the island's other immense seat of spiritual power, drawing pilgrims from across the region. A vivid childhood memory was watching his father sit down with the temple's high priest. There they were, two figures in traditional attire, discussing spiritual matters. When old enough, the boy mustered the courage to ask his father the burning question: how exactly did his mysterious prayers work? His father offered an answer that stripped away the mystery. He explained that prayer operates as a vehicle. When you pray, you transcend your physical body and become a part of the cosmos, a space that knows no division of wealth, age, caste, or creed. This explanation reframed the magic of the ritual. His father's power was no longer a supernatural spell, but a bridge built by looking past worldly labels. But the boy was sharp, and he pressed the issue. Why not use this divine connection to directly banish the distress and suffering of the fearful villagers begging for his help? His father stopped entirely, placed his hands on the boy's shoulders, and looked into his eyes, pausing to gauge whether his son was ready for the truth. The father's text reveals he merely acted as a go-between to appease fears of demonic forces, an approach he condemned. His ultimate lesson? We must seek the enemy of fulfillment within ourselves. He taught his son to view suffering as a mirror for introspection. Real strength didn't come from relying on a middleman to fight your monsters, but from finding the internal courage to face them yourself. These spiritual teachings were anchored in a grueling physical reality. Long before the sun came up, the father would begin his day at 4 a.m. to read his daily prayers. Immediately after, he would step out into the darkness and embark on a 4-mile journey on foot. His destination was this vibrant, dense coconut grove owned by the family, sitting on the edge of the island. By the time the sun finally rose, the father would be walking back home with a dozen heavy coconuts slung over his shoulders. He maintained this exact physical routine every single day well into his late 60s. His spiritual perspective was built upon a foundation of relentless daily discipline. Eventually, that curious young boy grew up and left the island. He carried those lessons of discipline and introspection with him, striving to emulate his father in an entirely different arena. He applied this blend of logic and introspection to the world of science and technology. That inquisitive boy grew up to become A.P.J. ABDUL Kalam, one of his nation's most revered scientists and leaders. Even at the height of his career, Kalam remained convinced that a divine power exists to lift an individual up from confusion, misery, and failure. He believed that when an individual finally severs their bonds of fear and looks within, they find themselves on the road to freedom and peace of mind.